The evening was serene. The sun was beginning to descend behind the hills, illuminating our quiet neighborhood with a gentle orange glow. I was in the kitchen cooking dinner to the soft tunes of the radio in the background. My son, Tyler, had just gotten home from college for the weekend. The atmosphere in the house was calm and familiar, giving me a sense of peace. Tyler had grown up amazingly fast. It seemed like it was just yesterday when he was a little boy, running after me and asking countless questions about the world. Now, at the age of 22, he has transformed from a boy to a young man, strong, confident, and at times unintentionally aloof. Our relationship evolved as he matured, and I was still adjusting to this new situation in our relationship. Dinner was ready, and I called him from the living room. As we sat down at the table, I noticed his gaze lingering on me with renewed intensity. At first, I brushed it off, thinking it was just my imagination. We talked about his classes, his friends, and how much he missed home. But the way he looked at me, the way his eyes lingered on me longer than usual, evoked feelings in me that I couldn't put into words. After dinner, we decided to watch a movie together, something we used to do all the time before he left for college. The living room was cozier than usual. The dim lighting and soft cushions created the perfect setting for a relaxing evening. I couldn't remember the last time we had spent such a quiet evening together. As the movie went on, I began to look at him more often than I should have, noticing how he had grown into a man. He was no longer the little boy I had raised. And then, as a strange unease swept over me, he moved closer to me on the couch. At first I thought it was innocent, but then his hand touched mine. A spark went through me, something electric, something I knew I wasn't supposed to feel. I quickly yanked my hand away, startled by the intensity of the moment. "What's wrong, Mom?" he asked, his voice soft and full of concern. I looked up at him, my heart racing. I didn't know what to say. "It's nothing, sweetie. I'm just tired, that's all," I replied, trying to brush off my feelings and hoping he didn't notice the tension between us. But I knew something had changed in that moment, something unspoken and dangerous. We sat in silence, the movie playing in the background, but neither of us were paying attention anymore. I got up saying I needed to go to bed early, but as I left, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed between us. As I lay in bed that night, my thoughts were in turmoil. I knew I couldn't let this feeling grow. I had to keep my distance for both of our sakes. But deep down, I didn't know how to do that. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of unease. The events of the previous night flashed through my mind. I tried to brush the feeling away, telling myself it was all in my head. I was his mother, no more and no less. I loved him deeply, but not in a way that could be misunderstood. I was being unreasonable, I told myself. When I came downstairs, Tyler was already sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and greeted me with a smile as if nothing had happened. "Good morning," I said, forcing myself to smile and speak as calmly as possible. "Good morning, Mom," he replied, his voice casual and easy. "I was thinking about going for a walk later. Would you like to join me? We haven't done anything like this in ages." I hesitated, hesitant to spend time alone with him after the feelings I'd experienced the previous night. But then I reminded myself that we were just mother and son spending time together. There was nothing wrong with that. "Sure," I said. "Sounds good." Later in the afternoon, we drove to a nearby trail we'd often gone to when he was younger. The air was light, the sky was blue, and for a moment everything seemed normal. We walked side by side, having a quiet conversation about old memories, his plans for the future, the usual topics. I laughed, feeling calmer and thinking that perhaps I'd overreacted the night before. But as we walked down the trail, moments of silence lingered longer than they should have, thickening the air around us. When we reached a clearing with a beautiful view of the valley, Tyler stopped and turned to me. "You've always been there for me, Mom," he said, his voice soft and serious. "I don't know what I would have done without you." There was something in his tone that caught me off guard, a vulnerability that made my heart snap. I smiled, trying to lighten the mood. "Well, you don't have to worry about that." "I'm not going anywhere," I said, trying to make a joke. But he didn't laugh. Instead, he stepped closer, his eyes staring intently at mine. "No, I'm serious," he continued. "You've always been more than just a mom to me. You were everything." I froze, the words hanging in the air, heavy with meaning I wasn't ready to face. I searched his face, hoping he was just being sentimental, that this was an innocent moment. But the look in his eyes made my heart race. "Tyler," I said in a barely audible whisper. "You know how much I love you, don't you?" "Of course," he replied, taking another step toward me. "I love you too, more than you realize." My pulse quickened. A mother and son weren't supposed to talk or look at each other like that. My mind screamed for me to pull back, to create distance, but my body felt like it was frozen in place. "We should go back," I said, my voice shaking. "It's getting late." But before I could step back, he reached out and gently touched my shoulder. The touch was innocent enough, but the way he lingered, the way his thumb lightly ran over my skin, made my stomach twist with feelings I couldn't ignore. "Mom," he said softly, his voice filled with something I couldn't put a name to. I don't know how to explain it, but I feel something I shouldn't feel. I think you felt it too. A wave of panic swept over me and I jerked my hand away, taking a step back. My heart was pounding frantically. "Tyler, stop," I said, my voice shaking. "This isn't what you meant." "You're confused." He looked at me, confusion and pain mixed in his gaze. "I'm not confused, Mom. I know how I feel." "No," I said, shaking my head. "This isn't right. You're my son. We can't do this." I couldn't finish the sentence. The words seemed too dangerous to say out loud. Tyler took a deep breath, his face filled with emotion. "I know it's wrong, but I can't help it. And I don't think you can either." Tears filled my eyes, and I struggled to keep my composure. I had to stop this before it went any further, before we crossed a line we couldn't cross anymore. "I'm your mother," I said in a barely audible whisper. "And I love you. But not like this. We can't." The words hung between us, heavy and suffocating. I saw the pain in his eyes, saw his shoulders slump as he nodded slowly, lowering his gaze as if in shame. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable." "It's okay," I said softly, though I wasn't sure I really meant it. "Let's go home." The drive back was filled with silence, each second dragging agonizingly long. Tyler was silent, and so was I. The weight of our conversation settled between us, making every moment unbearable. When we pulled up to the house, Tyler mumbled something about going to his room. I didn't bother to stop him. As soon as he disappeared up the stairs, I collapsed onto the couch, my body shaking with the emotions I'd been holding back since that moment on the trail. He was my son, my child, but he wasn't a child anymore. Our relationship had taken on a complexity that neither of us expected. I wanted to believe that his feelings would pass, that this was just a passing phase. But the way he looked at me, the way his hand lingered, told me otherwise. Some part of me felt guilty, like I'd done something wrong. Had I been too affectionate, too close all these years? But after all, that's what mothers were supposed to do. Love their children, be there for them. That's all I ever did. In the days that followed, I tried to avoid him, doing chores and anything else that would distract me from the confusion I was feeling. By evening, I was emotionally drained. I couldn't ignore what had happened, but I wasn't ready to admit it either. We couldn't keep pretending everything was normal, even though it wasn't. That night, after hours of sleeplessness, I heard a quiet knock on the door. My heart beat even faster. I knew it was him. "Mom, can I come in?" Tyler's voice was hesitant, almost pleading. I hesitated, every instinct telling me to say no. But I knew I couldn't avoid him forever. We had to come face to face. "Come in," I said quietly, sitting up in bed and pulling the blanket over me, as if it could protect me from the coming emotional storm. Tyler walked in, stopping right in front of the door and looking confused. "I'm sorry, Mom," he whispered, his voice full of regret. I shouldn't have said those things. I nodded, trying to find the right words. "I know it's confusing, Tyler," I said softly, But what happened before shouldn't happen again. We have to remember who we are to each other. I'm your mother, and that's all I can be. He lowered his gaze, his shoulders slumping. I don't want to lose you, he murmured. I reached out and gently touched his arm. You'll never lose me, Tyler. But we need to set boundaries. It's necessary for both of us. We sat in silence for a while, both of us struggling with emotions we couldn't quite express. Finally, I took a deep breath. Maybe it would be best if you went back to school tomorrow, I suggested. Give us both some space to clear our heads. He nodded, his face darkened with sadness, but he understood. You're right. The next morning, I watched him pack his things. There were no words between us, just a heavy silence that said more than anything we could have said. As he walked out the door, I felt hurt, but knew it was for the best. As soon as he left, the house was quiet, too quiet. I sat down and stared at the empty room, determined to rebuild our relationship into something healthy, something right. We'd crossed the line, but now we had a chance to back out. And I intended to take it,